we want to give our community hope and, that sense of empowerment that what they do actually matters. And, by celebrating all of the great news that's happening in combination with recognizing, the bad things that are happening, I think that has resulted in quite a good balance where in our community, I see a lot of people learning from each other and discussing and, kind of developing their own kind of critical thinking around this.
Hello, and welcome back to Seek the Joy podcast. Happy Seek the Joy Tuesday. I'm your host, Sydney Weiss, and before we even dive in to today's new episode, I want to take a moment and talk a little bit about everything that has been going on in the world over the last month and a half with Ukraine and Russia. And I want to start off by saying that my heart really goes out to anyone and everyone that is affected and impacted, and whether you are in Eastern Europe or you have family that's there or you're just a human being living through this tumultuous time, it is tragic and unbelievable on every level. And I'm not going to pretend for 5 seconds to be a foreign affairs expert, because I am definitely not, and I spend a lot of time educating myself and informing myself on what is going on. And at the same time, I want to share with you that I batch record these episodes. And that also means I batch record these intros. And so every episode, every intro for the month of March was recorded at the beginning of February. The intros were, at least. And so I had recorded all these intros prior to everything going on in the world. And I thought, okay, I should go back in and re-record. But I also told myself in 2022 that I would be really mindful of my own schedule and bandwidth, and so that just wasn't a possibility. And so I really wanted to take a moment to acknowledge what's going on in the world, because so often I've talked about on this podcast the importance of recognizing the reality that we're living in, but also acknowledging that we need to take care of ourselves and pursue our joy and connection and community and conversation and practice our own self-care. And so we can hold the two at the same time. And I've talked about this so many times, but then at the same time, I wasn't talking about it in the intros on the podcast throughout March because I had already recorded them. So I guess there's something to be said for maybe going back to the model that I was doing in 2020 and 2021 of recording everything the week of. I don't know. We'll see. But truly, my thoughts are with everyone and anyone impacted and affected by what is going on. And there's so many incredible resources out there. And I shared them in our March newsletter, but I want to mention some of them here. I mean, Bethany Frankel, Be Strong, has been doing such incredible work. There's World Central Kitchen with Chef Jose Andres, and organizations like Hope for Ukraine. And so wherever it is that you choose to send donations or money or prayers, I think it is all so meaningful. It is all so meaningful. So I don't know how to transition, but we're just going to do it. I really think you're going to enjoy today's episode with Jodi Monelle. She's the founder and CEO of LIVEKINDLY. It's the world's leading sustainable lifestyle platform that's here to inform, illuminate, and connect people to ego-conscious choices. And in this episode, we dive into the inspiration behind LIVEKINDLY, what it means to live kindly, and why sustainable change really comes from empowering people to make positive change. One of my favorite parts of the episode is where we dive into how LIVEKINDLY is really welcoming those that are eco-curious and eco-conscious, and why it's so important to celebrate sustainable wins versus focusing on fear-mongering. We talk about how Jodi defines sustainability, the connection between mindfulness and conscious living, and how LIVEKINDLY is really creating content that creates a positive narrative around sustainability and environmentalism. Plus, Jodi shares her entrepreneurial journey, the impact of LIVEKINDLY, her biggest dream, and so much more. Now more than ever, I just think it's so important that we have reliable resources that we can turn to. And that's where today's sponsor, BetterHelp, comes in. So I would love to share with you a little bit more about BetterHelp. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. And it's easy and free to change counselors if you don't think the person you've matched with is a good fit. And no matter where you're listening to Seek the Joy podcast right now, you can also use BetterHelp because the service is available for people worldwide too. I just think it's so valuable to talk to someone about what it is that you're going through, whether that's anxiety, depression, grief, loss, changes at work, or friendship dynamics or relationships, or you want to talk about the challenges of the last couple of years. And BetterHelp offers a broad range of expertise in their counselor network. So you'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions too, which I still think is a game changer. I really want you to live a happier, more joyful, and just ease-filled life. That's why I share these conversations with you. And so I'm just excited to share that as a listener of Seek the Joy podcast, you will get 10% off your first month by going to betterhelp.com/seekthejoy. Join over 1 million people and counting, taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/seekthejoy. The link will also be included in our show notes. I can't wait to hear what you think about today's new episode, so make sure to join the conversation on our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We are at Seek the Joy Podcast everywhere. Thank you so much to everyone who over the last 4.5 years has left the podcast a rating and review, whether that's on Apple Podcasts, and now you can rate the podcast 5 stars on Spotify as well. So make sure to do that. It really helps the show. Send this episode, send the podcast to your friends, your family, your community. That is also just such a wonderful way to support the podcast, to support my work on this show. And that's really it. I just think this is one you're really going to enjoy. This month on the podcast, we're really talking about the different ways in which mindfulness shows up in our lives. And it's so interesting to me, the way in which sustainability and conscious living really interacts with that element of mindfulness. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Jodi Monelle, founder and CEO of Live Kindly. I think what you've created with Live Kindly is really cool, and something that I think we need more of, these spaces that welcome sustainability and conscious living, and doing so in a way that I think is approachable, which is something that more of us need. So to kick this off, I would love to just talk about Live Kindly. What inspired it? How did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Well, it's coming up to about 5 years ago now. It feels like much longer than that for a good reason, but lots of things have happened during that time. But yeah, I was inspired to do it for a number of reasons, really. I personally kind of went on a bit of a journey myself, finding sustainability and wanting to adopt that kind of plant-based and more sustainable lifestyle in general myself. And then on the career side, I had about 10 or so years in publishing, social media, marketing, and I always kind of wanted to start my own business. And it just so happened that these two things came together. I felt, there was a big space that was kind of missing and not filled when it came to sustainable living. There was a lot of judgment out there, a lot of misinformation. There wasn't a lot of kind of inclusivity and empowering people to make, these positive decisions in their lives. So yeah, it kind of put these two pieces together, my personal background and, my personal journey there, and then my career, and birthed Live Kindly.
Yeah, I love what you started to talk about, your journey finding sustainability. And I'm curious if we could talk maybe a little bit about that, just maybe the personal aspects that brought you to this work in this space. I think I read somewhere that you went vegan, right? And that inspired sort of this shift and looking for a hub of these sorts.
Yeah. I had been traveling with my partner at the time. I was living in New Zealand, so I'd been traveling for, I think it was a couple of years. And, there was just a point where I felt quite out of touch with what I believed and what I was doing. I'd spent a lot more time in nature while I was living in New Zealand. So I was going out on hikes and seeing how beautiful the environment was, which is not something that I grew up with. I didn't spend a lot of time in nature growing up in the UK. So it was kind of a new experience for me. And I'd always claimed I was, an environmentalist, but my choices didn't really match that. And, I was in a position where I could start incorporating these options into my life. And, I wasn't by any means particularly wealthy at the time. I was traveling on a very small budget. But I did have certain privileges that enabled me to shop more sustainably. And so, to be honest, I didn't have a good enough argument not to.
That's so interesting. So today, what does it mean to you or to the company to live kindly?
Yeah, I think, that's evolved over the last 5 years. And we've really started to kind of understand what it means on a deeper level in terms of everything that we do in the company and everything kind of external as well. So for us, it's about being a platform that encompasses many different people's voices. So a lot of people ask me the question, why are you not more of a prominent face of Live Kindly? And, that was never the goal for me. It was always for me to help people feel a bit more empowered with their decisions and feel good and find solutions in their day-to-day lives that were a bit more accessible than they perhaps had realized. This is why we talk about new product launches, all of this kind of stuff. And really, for us, it's about showing people and giving many voices a platform. So, coming at it with a very inclusive, mindful approach. And like I was just saying, this is something that is really throughout Live Kindly. So it's down to how we hire team members and how we operate and how we manage our culture. And then on top of that, it's about the content that we produce as well. So it really flows through in every decision that we make as a business.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting is the platform you've created. I know you've discussed it as being solution focused and inviting and inclusive. And so I'm curious, how do you go about doing that? Because let's say someone is listening and they're curious about living a more eco-conscious lifestyle or being more sustainable or incorporating a more plant-based diet. It can totally run the gamut, right? How does Live Kindly, I guess, welcome people into this space? How have you been able to make it so inclusive and maybe solution focused for someone who's brand new to these conversations?
Yeah, we approach everything without judgment. So we recognize that there are people who are coming from, a multitude of different backgrounds, and whether that is from a dietary choice to, cultures in terms of, where they live in the world, so geographically. And then, people have so many different experiences depending on gender, race, all of this, ethnicity. And I think it's so important that, we find a way to represent those voices by working with people from very diverse backgrounds. So we, work with a lot of freelancers. We have a pretty diverse, full-time team as well. And so welcoming as many different voices as possible for creating the content, because we don't think that one voice or one experience is representative of everyone's. So hopefully people can find themselves in our content, and they may not do it with, every single piece, but we try to be very well-rounded and mindful with, having a good amount of inclusivity and diversity in all of the content that we produce. On top of that, we really kind of approach the content, like I said, in a non-judgmental way, in that we will be talking to people, not assuming that they are already living sustainably and not assuming that they would know everything. This is a place for conversation. It's a place to learn. It's a place to find out, what your line is, or what journey you want to take, because not everyone wants to be vegan and not everyone can possibly live zero waste. I think it's very difficult for a lot of people. So we recognize that, and it's just a safe place for people to be able to come and learn and, decide what route they want to take and what is even possible for them.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting about not only there being a diversity of voices and experiences, but also deciding what you want to learn and what you want to expose yourself to in this space. And so I'm curious then, what kind of impact can somebody have by making maybe small or conscious decisions or just dipping their toe in the water, in these spaces? Because I think, okay, we go through this cycle with ourselves of, okay, this is something I'm interested in, but oh my God, it seems so daunting. So even if we just want to take a small step or make a small conscious decision in changing something about our lifestyles, I'm curious about the impact, because I think that is the most important aspect of all of this.
Yeah, totally. That's also a great question. I think about this a lot because and I don't have any data points to it. I don't know if there are any studies out there that can really truly measure that. But just anecdotally from what I've seen, especially in the last 5 years of producing content on sustainability and talking about plant-based living, all of this stuff, it's crazy to see how far it's come and how it's become a really kind of big talking point for a lot of people, especially plant-based, seeing Beyond Meat IPO, for example. This kind of stuff was unheard of 5 years ago. People didn't really know anything about veganism or plant-based food or anything like that. So I think, to answer your question in a more anecdotal way, I think it's kind of just incredible to see the power of, consumer choices. It's supply and demand, essentially. So if consumers are really asking for something and we do that en masse, then, the corporations will make those decisions to change, because at the end of the day, they want to make money. So it's exciting to see that happen. And I think, while it's definitely not only the responsibility of the consumer, it really is, something that corporations need to take much more responsibility for. It is incredible to see the impact that our individual choices can make when they add up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think because sometimes we totally underestimate the impact of our decisions as, quote unquote, common everyday people. We're not running a huge company focused on sustainability or conscious living or being more mindful in these spaces. But the truth is one thing you can do, like any one thing you choose to do, can have such a large impact. And I think we're really waking up to that. I think over the course of the pandemic, realizing just, one small change in your life can have this really incredible ripple effect.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm curious, we've been talking about this word sustainability throughout our conversation so far. How do you define sustainability?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I do think that the word can be overused. And honestly, I don't think there is anything that is really truly sustainable in terms of like your entire lifestyle. Everything, has an impact when you produce it, right? So we can live more sustainably. I think living a totally sustainable lifestyle can be very, very difficult, if not impossible, for the average person. So for me, it's about, doing what you can with, the resources that you have, and making the better choice when you have that option available to you. So it can look different for different people. For me, for example, I find it very difficult to go totally zero waste. I try to eliminate it as much as possible. So I, don't buy plastic bottles, things like that. But to go totally zero waste, I've really struggled with it. And I travel a lot, so I find it very difficult to do that while traveling as well. So yeah, unfortunately, for many people, there will be certain compromises that they will have to make. The world isn't really built in a way that allows us to live totally sustainably at the moment. But I see, many things going in that direction. So hopefully it will get easier.
Yeah, I think so. I think with more innovation, innovative products and companies, I think we'll get closer and closer, plus all of us making those decisions along the way. And I think there's got to be this mindful component to sustainability, to conscious living. I'm curious maybe what your thoughts are on that, because often on this podcast, we talk about wellness, we talk about mindfulness. And I'm just always so curious about the connection maybe that you've seen or maybe how this impacts your own life between maybe conscious living and mindfulness, maybe how do they really work together, or how have you seen them work together in your own life?
Yeah, in my own life, especially when I first went fully plant-based, I think that it was an interesting time for me. I really kind of, I think, saw a bigger kind of alignment in my actions versus and how I felt and thought about things. So I don't know how exactly to describe that, but it was interesting to see just that whole process of that happening, and to feel a bit more connected with myself, because I was really, valuing my own views. And I think that also just having kind of more respect for others and the earth in general. I haven't really thought about it in so much detail to be able to articulate it, but it is a really unique experience. And I think it just helps us become more compassionate and empathetic human beings, which is what we need more in the world right now, more than anything, to be more compassionate towards each other. So I found that has been a significant result in me kind of being more mindful about my actions in general.
Yeah.
It kind of spans out much wider than your choices of, diet and consumer choices in general. It spans much wider than that.
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you said it really expands much more than just the everyday choices that you make. And there are a couple of words that you said that I wrote down that I think are really powerful. It was about connection to self, about becoming more grounded, respect for yourself, but also for the planet, and then compassion and greater empathy. And I think that sort of is the root of all of this, of making these choices, of celebrating maybe diversity in the space of sustainability, is about fostering greater compassion and empathy and respect, both for yourself and for others. And then I think by extension, the planet. And something that you do on Live Kindly that I think is really wonderful is it's about celebrating sustainability versus inserting fear into people, because of course, right, there's different forms of activism in these spaces. And I'm curious if maybe you can speak a little bit to that, because oftentimes, when we're talking about a plant-based lifestyle, or just moving closer to zero waste, or climate change, or whatever the topic is, fear is a huge part of that narrative. And I know for you and for Live Kindly, it's not about fear. So I'm curious, maybe if we could talk a little bit about that, because I think having that varying perspective and shifting away from fear is always so important, no matter what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's totally true. We try to approach everything without shame and without fear-mongering. We really want to create value and to empower people with our content. So it's such an important thing for us. And it can make it difficult to navigate controversial topics sometimes, but we found creative and thoughtful ways to do that actually more so enable critical thinking and conversation rather than arguments in the comment section. So it's important for us to not avoid things which are happening when it comes to climate change, because there are terrible things and it is scary to see them, and we can't completely avoid looking at that. But at the end of the day, there are things that we can learn from it. There are things that we can do. And I think that we spend so much time on social media, often kind of feeling powerless with the content that we see and the news articles that we read, that we just want to give we want to give our community hope and, that sense of empowerment that what they do actually matters. And, by celebrating all of the great news that's happening in combination with recognizing, the bad things that are happening, I think that has resulted in quite a good balance where in our community, I see a lot of people learning from each other and discussing and, kind of developing their own kind of critical thinking around this. I think, particularly climate change can become, and veganism as well, can become very political sometimes. And we try to take that out of it and really just open the door for healthy discussion. I think that's the way forward. to talk about things and to respect each other while we're doing it.
Yeah, healthy discussion and that element of respect is huge. And something you said about through the content, it's about empowering people. And I just kept thinking, the more we feel empowered in these spaces, the more I think we're going to be inclined to make a difference and inclined to make changes. And I know that a huge part of Live Kindly is about creating this positive narrative so that we can learn from each other in these spaces. Is there maybe a moment or a story or something that stands out to you about watching others sort of learn from each other through the platform? I mean, gosh, there's got to be so many instances of that, I could imagine.
Yeah, it's honestly very difficult to pinpoint one because it happens so often.
Yeah.
I've had, a number of kind of personal interactions from people who are fans or followers of Live Kindly who have reached out to me and, let me know that they've completely 360'd their life because of some of the content, that's helped them to get a job in sustainability or typically change career paths, which is such a big move. And it's not something that would first come to mind. But that has happened a number of times where people have stepped out of a role where they didn't feel so passionate about and didn't align with their way of thinking about sustainable living or climate change, whatever it is, or veganism or plant-based, and they've moved into a career that is more closely aligned to that. So that's happened on a number of occasions, and that's pretty big. But yeah, more so on a day-to-day basis, we have a lot of people who will just thank us for, helping them to eat more plant-based or to live more sustainably. This is something which is a daily occurrence, which is really rewarding to see.
Yeah, in many ways, it feels like you've been able to bring positivity, hope, and excitement and empowerment into a space that often doesn't have these qualities. I don't know. To me, that's just my impression for a conversation. And so I'm super curious about the impact of joy on your life and your journey through Live Kindly. This might be like a Sydney moment, but do you get joy from what you do with Live Kindly? Has it been able to foster that sense of joy within you as you continue this work?
Yeah, I think, definitely the biggest thing for me is that I feel like I'm doing something with purpose that I believe in. And this is probably what I struggled with prior to starting Live Kindly. I always love marketing. I love learning about social media, publishing, advertising, all of that. And I love the creative aspect of it. So I really love designing things. But in my previous roles, it was really for the sake of creating content and not something that I cared deeply about. And for me to experience those two things coming together, something that I enjoyed doing for work and something that I cared deeply about on a personal level, you can't match that. It would be very difficult for me to ever step into a different role that was outside of that, because I really believe in what we're doing. And it definitely comes with struggles as well. But the overall feeling is definitely one of joy and inspiration, and personally it empowers me as well.
Thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful. I know at the top of our conversation, you talked about how your own passion and the values that you hold so dear really came together through your entrepreneurial journey in starting Live Kindly. And there are tons of entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast, and I'm always curious about the stress, the pressure, the demands of entrepreneurship. And I'm curious what your journey has been like, maybe fostering your own self-care, balancing your own health and wellness while being an entrepreneur in a space that focuses so heavily too on conscious living and eco-consciousness and sustainability. What has that been like for you, if you're open to sharing about it?
Yeah, I always get asked this question and I haven't got any better at answering it. And I'm pretty guilty of neglecting that, which is really bad. And it's something that I'm focused on. I don't tend to do New Year's resolutions, but it's something that I'm really focused on this year, that I want to spend more time taking care of that. And it's been difficult. I would say that I was thrown into the deep end of being an entrepreneur and growing a business, it grew much faster than I anticipated. And, we were acquired by a company that then acquired our name a couple of years ago. And, going from a fast growing startup to now working in a more corporate feeling environment has been a huge transition, and not an easy one necessarily. It's been really interesting for me to kind of experience that, but it's been wild, and it's definitely taken its toll on my health and my kind of, a lot of my personal time. So I've made a lot of sacrifices for it when it comes to all of that. So difficult. And I think part of that was definitely necessary for us to, build it to this stage that it is now. But yeah, I truly believe that it's so important that you do take care of your kind of personal health and your mental health and physical health, to be able to continue, giving it your all and giving it your best, and to be able to continue growing it and, keep that vision and keep all of the energy. That said, I don't know exactly how to do that yet. I'm trying to set better boundaries. It's very difficult when something is, quote unquote, your baby, and you don't really know when a cutoff point is. So it's not a typical 9 to 5. We also work across different time zones, so it can make it very difficult. But I'm learning, and it's definitely something that I believe is important. I just haven't got there myself yet.
Hey, I think that level of honesty is so appreciated, and I think so relatable. I think so many of us, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher, a parent, we all experience this of recognizing we need to take better care of ourselves, but how do we actually do it? How do we actually find the time? And so I very much appreciate your honesty in that question, because I think it would be so easy to say, oh yeah, I've got this. I carve out time for a walk and to journal and to meditate and to eat better. But the truth is, there's not enough time in the day. And sometimes you do have to make those sacrifices, along the way. And I think that's the reality, of creating these spaces. But eventually we figure out how to take better care of ourselves. But part of that is weaving in that compassion and empathy for ourselves as we navigate that journey.
I will say, though, it's been incredible to build the team that I have to the stage that it is now, and to really work with people that are able to not only, support and operate the business, but they really are a huge support to me as well. So we have a fantastic team of around about 20 people. Wow. And it's been really incredible to watch that grow, but to be able to work together with them and to work with people who are experts in their own right, and to feel very safe if I need to step away, that has been a game changer. So I couldn't have done any of this without them.
Something to be said for an incredible team around you. Absolutely. I'm curious, do you have a go-to mantra, quote, or affirmation, or something that you've maybe relied on or hold on to that continues to inspire either you personally or your work with Live Kindly?
I don't really have a mantra, but something that kind of sticks with me is, or two things that I think got me to this stage would be my ability to take risks, and it's not without fear. The fear doesn't go, but to be able to allow myself, to give myself permission to take risks, is something that I think is truly the reason for us to have grown the business to the stage that it is now, because I took a lot of risks personally and for the business as well. Definitely kind of calculated risks, so not just ones without any thought, but risk taking, I think, is something that often is a barrier for a lot of people to take that first leap, and also resilience. So resilience is something which I found you really need as an entrepreneur, as kind of anyone who is wanting to start their own business. There's going to be a lot of kind of tough obstacles to face, and to stay strong through that is, of course, easier said than done. But I think it's something which has, definitely again, been part of the success of Live Kindly. Is those two things have really kind of kept me going.
Yeah. It's almost like feel the fear and do it anyway. And then recognize that as you go through it, you will build that resilience muscle sort of for yourself as you go. Yeah. I'm curious if there's anything about this journey that has surprised you, either your own personal journey or the journey with Live Kindly, that you were just like, nope, didn't expect that.
I think there have been many surprises along the way. One of the most rewarding ones has been the types of people that it's brought into my life. So how it's been received by many people who wouldn't necessarily, or I wouldn't typically think would be supportive or appreciative of what I'm doing, and it always comes from the most surprising people. And that's been a really amazing experience, to have conversations with people about sustainable living, about plant-based, about living kindly in general, with people I never thought I would have these conversations with. And I think that's truly down to our positioning of, being welcoming and being inclusive. It's kind of allowed a lot of people, given a lot of people permission to kind of explore that side of them, which maybe they didn't feel comfortable doing before. So on a personal level, it's been amazing for me to have those conversations with, friends and family members in my life as well.
As we sort of wrap up this conversation, I would love to ask you the question I ask everyone that comes on the podcast. And that is, what is your biggest dream? And it can be about your life. It can be about Live Kindly, but I just always love asking this question.
Oh my gosh, you ask so many good questions. You know what? Again, that's another one that I do find slightly difficult, because I'm someone that I feel very much lives in the moment. So I'm not a big planner. I'm someone that is pretty spontaneous, and I'm not someone that's typically thinking kind of 5-10 years ahead. But if I were forced to, I think, just seeing the world become a more compassionate place, and whether that is sustainable, whether that is plant-based, it doesn't matter so much to me. I mean, it does. It's something that I'm passionate about. But like I said, people will find their own path. But for me, it's about treating people with kindness, and it's about the compassion. And if we can make an ounce of difference in that space, and if we can create a bigger movement, I'm just wanting to be part of that, and I'm hoping we see more of that in the future.
I think that element of kindness is really what is so pervasive through Live Kindly, and has allowed it to become this platform that creates and encourages positive discussion and encouragement around conscious living and sustainability, and making, I think, informed choices for yourself. So that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I love this conversation and having the opportunity to sit down with you. Can you share where everyone can connect with you, connect with Live Kindly, and learn more?
Yeah, so you can go to livekindly.com. You can also find us at Live Kindly on Instagram. I think we're across pretty much every social media platform if you just search Live Kindly. And you can always reach out and email our team as well. So yeah, we love to connect with our community.
Perfect. Everything will go in the show notes. So we'll make it so easy for everyone to connect with you, connect with Live Kindly, and learn more. And Jodi, just thank you so much again. This is going to be a fun one to share.
Thank you, Sydney.
Seek the Joy podcast is a production of Seek the Joy Media, and created, produced, and hosted by me, Sydney Weiss. You can tune into all of our episodes on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're enjoying the show, hit follow and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Make sure to join the community, join the conversation on our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We are at Seek the Joy Podcast everywhere. And don't forget, you can actually watch today's new episode and all of our episodes on our brand new YouTube channel. Click that link in the show notes to subscribe and tune in. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you right back here next week for another Seek the Joy Tuesday.